law, general law, chapter 30, section 18, and the governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Southborough Library Board of Trustees will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information in the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at https://southboroughtown.com/. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to listen to the meeting may do so in the following manner: https://southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. Okay, no in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In this case, it's being streamed live on YouTube. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will put on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Okay. Because it's a virtual meeting, we need to do a roll call. So if each of you would just give your name and say present. Marguerite Landry, chair, present.
Jane Davis, secretary, present.
Amy Vacris, present.
Janet Maney, present.
Kim Regan, present.
Amy Asdani, present.
Okay, and also present Ryan. Do you want to?
Ryan Donovan, non-trustee, library director, present.
Also director. Okay, first order of business is going to be that we approve the minutes of the March 9th meeting. Does anybody have any corrections or emendations for that? Okay, I move to approve as submitted.
I second to approve them as submitted.
Okay, now we need to do a roll call vote again. So I say Marguerite Landry, aye.
Amy Asdani, aye.
Amy Vacris, aye.
Janet Maney, aye.
Jane Davis, aye.
Kim, did you?
Yeah, I did it at the same time as Janet
Oh, okay.
Regan. Aye.
Okay, so that passes unanimously. Okay,
Go
number.
alphabetically or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should. I can see your pictures in a certain sequence, but I bet you're seeing them in a different sequence than I am.
So Jane Davis can kick it off.
Okay, we have to do it again?
No, next time.
Okay.
We'll use the same. All right.
But Marguerite and I were determined that she is going to motion and I second for
Okay.
this. So that's why for that,
Just
yeah,
that's easier to always be in that system. Okay.
for the
All
secretary.
right, so budgets and reports and discussions. The budget for FY 2021. We have 3 versions, which is the original of 4.4. Then one where we're down to 2% tax increase, and then we're also down to 0% tax increase. Ryan, do you want to explain your rationale?
Sure. So this was based on the Board of Selectmen meeting that took place the evening of April 21st. I actually was able to virtually attend that sort of as just a background viewer, where the selectmen, sort of looking at the financial impact of the pandemic, wanted to sort of revisit the overall budget picture for FY21. So we received an email from the finance team, which really is, Mark Purple, the town administrator, and Brian Valentine, the finance director, to revise the budgets. And they had on Friday given us amounts. So sort of the thing I just want to say is, we talk about the sort of 2% overall tax increase for everyone, and then a 0%, a no tax increase version of the budget. That impacts the library somewhat differently. I'm sure you can see from the amounts that we're giving feedback on. So it looks more for the library budget a little over a 3% increase. I do have the ability to share the budgets if you wanted me to bring them up, and we can discuss them. I know many of you have reviewed them already, and I'm available if you want to ask any questions.
Could I just ask you to, the difference between the first budget that we submitted, which was the 4.4%, the 2% budget and the 0% budget? I know that you only did cuts in certain places and that you explained that. Could you just do it for purposes of putting it into the record?
Sure.
You did.
So I'll preface this with in the email where Mark had asked us to put this together. He also said that any cuts that we do, right, and any budget reductions we look at wouldn't just be for FY21. They would be through FY23 at a minimum. So we're really looking at reductions that would take place over the next 3 years. So that is that's significant when you're looking at the budget. So one of the things I really tried to maintain was the staffing levels. You know, that was something we really tried to work on in the last year with the new teen room in particular, because we want to make sure that that room is staffed as much and you know, as robustly as we can in order to do some of the programming objectives that we have. You know, in tandem with that was a programming budget, which is one of the items that had to be cut. So that's really where it started, was in trying to see if we could maintain the same salary data from the original budget. I'm calling it the original budget that we had approved a couple months ago into this sort of new revised version. So in the sort of the overall 2% version, we were able to do that. The 0% we were not. That results in even in trying to maintain the salaries, that was something we had to dip into in order to get down to that number. So it really only affects the part-time schedule, but we'd have to reduce the part-time schedule 22 hours and it would affect 10 employees. So that's fairly significant. So the other line items, the smaller ones, we don't have a lot of flexibility in dues because that's the consortium payment we do every year. And, we've discussed this in previous budget cycles. It's, that's not something we have flexibility on, because otherwise we can't have a computer system. That's how we sort of pay that bill. So, it's the ability to be on the network and inter-share with the other libraries. So I had to look at sort of the other line items. Really what we did was maintain sort of across the board with the smaller line items we have FY 20 levels. So what we had budgeted for this year in many of the line items is what we now have budgeted for next year. So those line items are essentially level funded. Instead of spending what we anticipated we're going to spend next year, we're going to have to kind of make this year's numbers work next year. That was sort of what I was trying to do. Would it be helpful if I pulled the budget up, or are you guys okay?
Why don't you do it for the
Okay.
people at home?
Well,
Ryan,
did
Ryan,
everybody print them out, or
sorry, what's that?
does everybody have them printed out?
Yeah.
I don't have them printed out, but I've taken a good look. But I wanted to ask a more general question, Ryan, if I may.
Sure.
And that is, if, things are uncertain in terms of what the library will be allowed to do in terms of number of people allowed in at a time, or some of the programming things. Do you have any idea from the greater statewide level what the impact on our programming and things like that may be over the course of this next year anyway, and how that may impact the staffing that you need and or the programming budget that you need to make things work? It seems to me those are some pretty big questions, if not for the next 2 or 3 years, at least for this coming year. Why, thank you.
So, at this point, the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners is getting feedback from people like me and actually people like you, people who are sort of in the library community. They're also looking, they're working with ALA and they're working with the other state library organizations, and they're trying to come up with a set of guidelines, which we'll be able to sort of roughly follow. That said, they recognize that every library is a little bit different and that may have different needs depending on their community and their size. The short answer is no. I don't anticipate, I stated a little bit ago that I'm sad that we lost, the program money, because that was really going to be our big new thing next year, is actually being able to fund a good amount of programs out of our operating budget, which is something I've been really trying to work on for the past couple years. We don't know what programming is going to look like when we come back. We don't even know when we're coming back realistically. So Kim and I did discuss this on Monday for a while, Kim Ivers, and who's the children's librarian. She thinks that it's reasonable to assume that some of the program plans we have in the summer and even into the fall are not going to be what we were doing, what we had planned, I should say. So I don't know about, that's a big question you asked, Amy.
Right. Well, I say it only in the sense that we have very few places in the budget to give, but it seems logical that those two places make sense. As much as we hate to get rid of both of them, a lot of that seems like it's out of our hands, simply because library either won't be open,
referring to
or
of the two
I'm talking about programming and salaries. If we don't need, if the library has to be open on reduced hours, at least for some time, or you don't need as many part-time people for things like programming, somebody extra, an extra set of hands or whatever. It seems like those are the logical changes that are going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that I'm happy about it, but I don't feel as though we're having to cut something that's going to be 100% anyway. So I think what you have done in regard to that makes perfect sense. I don't know where else to give, right?
My sense of it is that if we cut staff now, and I'm very, 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 very reluctant to do that, we're not going to get that staff back at least into FY 2024 or maybe
Right.
FY 2025. So once they're gone for maybe 3 or 4 years. There's also the issue that the Mass Library Association sent around that letter, that they're making a deep priority to keep retention of staff. The amount of money we're talking, if we let go of staff to get to 0%, is something like $13,000 for everybody over a year. To me, that's not a lot of money, and I think it's worth going to the mat, because once we lose staff, we're not going to get them back for a long time. So that's
I agree.
I understand that too, but where else would you suggest that the money come from, or is anyone in disagreement with what Ryan has already done?
We could cut programming. We've done it before.
Right.
Right. Which we did. Ryan, you did on the staff, it isn't a significant amount of cut on that, correct? Everything I've read, you've said part of it was from a previous amount of money that was in there to the assistant director.
Yeah.
Yes. So, we had budgeted going into this year a full-time assistant director, and we had voted after the assistant director's departure to not replace that, not to refill that position, but to look at what we previously had, to look at a full-time library assistant position. So it went from a 40-hour professional position to a 38-hour paraprofessional position. So we saved 2 hours per week. And then, the assistant director, who had young adult librarian responsibilities as well, was paid several dollars more per hour than the library assistant. So that saved us money, and we got a great we got a great staff member coming on with Carol Logan. And I'm very happy with how things turned out, but that is where there was I just realized why it was so dark and I didn't have the light on. So that was really where we, you'll see sort of that dip in the full-time. So let me just make sure. Okay, so this is the one I want to see. So you can see in the salaries and wages where I've highlighted, see how it's 351 for the full-time, and then it goes down to 339. That is really what we're talking about here, that negative 3.4. That's what the savings was between the two positions. You know, we did talk about augmenting, as a result of that, some of the part-time staff, and that's really where you kind of see that that increase, right? So we got a lot more hours for some of the existing part-time staff. You know, if they were working 2 days a week, we tried to have them for 3, and we definitely tried to have people fill in a little bit on Saturday. If we look at the 0%, which I can switch to.
I guess my point before, Ryan, was not to, I'm not interested in cutting staff or salaries at all if we can help.
Right.
But if the logical response to all of this is that we simply aren't open as many hours and we don't have as many programs, you simply aren't going to need as many people. So what does that look like? I mean, that's bound to have an impact. We don't want to be carrying extra people. I mean, that seems fiscally foolish too. So, I mean, I agree that programming should go before people in a heartbeat, but if there are no other places to cut, and are we being realistic and thinking that part-time folks may have to follow, and should we at least be talking about that and how that would be handled?
Now, Amy, that's a good point. What are the hours looking like? With this level of staffing, can we keep the team?
So that's a good point. I mean, it's really, I will say, it's not like every staff member participates in programming, right? A lot of what the staff do when they're at the library is they engage in a variety of activities related to sort of library operation. So many sort of do directed public service. Pretty much everybody does that. But a good example is sort of the library pages that deviate from that. The library pages sort of do a lot of the grunt work. They reshelve books. They pull holds. So if the library is operational in whatever format we come back in, let's say, you know, just for a scenario, we do some sort of curbside pickup, or we look at some sort of form of library delivery, or we even look at options utilizing the mail. You know, that was something that we tried to do with the seat exchange. We would still need those staff members in order to do some of the logistical support. And even though the staff aren't doing public service, I mean, remotely, the full-time staff aren't doing public service now, but they're engaging in a variety of activities, and everybody, I promise you, is staying very busy. They're sick of hearing from me. You know, we're using this as a great opportunity to work on website content in the next month, and our newsletter, this is my plug for anybody watching, but our newsletter for next month is going out on Friday, and it's fantastic because it's filled with readers' advisory suggestions from staff that have been working on this for the past 3 weeks. So this is something that I've always wanted to do. I wanted to do some sort of electronic version of book recommendations that the staff provide in person, and we've actually had the time, if we can look at a positive aspect, in order to do that. So, you know, I don't think if we're going to be open in some form moving forward, and I think we need to plan for that, because I don't think we're going to have a full closure for the entirety of the next fiscal year. That's starting this July until next July. So I would say it's fiscally responsible for us to look at maintaining staffing levels as much as possible.
Well, also, Amy, like he was just saying, they're asking us to look several years ahead. So hopefully we're not all in this position that far. I'd rather have enough staff for 2 to 3 years out and not be I mean, even as Ryan said, we're going to be cutting it tight, with being forced to cut as we are, so. But I think
Oh.
he's done an amazing job of getting blood from a stone.
The answer, though, because Amy asked a very pertinent question, and it's if we're trying to save
Yeah.
money on the staffing side, what is the other thing that we look at? And the other sort of big line item, the next up becomes the educational supplies and the materials budget. So there is an option for us, like in the print and electronic subscriptions, which is the new subset that we did for periodicals and we did for electronic subscriptions. So we could cut electronic subscriptions, but I would argue it has worked
Then not a
out
good-
that we had a lot of electronic content that people could access.
Right.
So
Right.
we really subscribe, I think, to about 7 or 8 things that people can access remotely. I'm happy to have a discussion about whether or not we should continue those, but I don't think I'm gonna advise that as the director. If anything, I feel like maybe we should long term, maybe it's in a couple years, but look at adding in
Yeah.
case we ever get into a situation like this again.
So we haven't heard from Kim and we haven't heard from Jane and we haven't heard from Janet.
I have a different kind of question. On the budget sheet that shows the 2% reduction, in fact, it comes to a 3% over the prior years, not 2%. So is that a problem or?
I will say that because I messed it up. The 2% and the 0% has to do with what the tax increase would be for the town, not the amount that's lopped off the budget. So the amount of money that was given for the library, if you have cut for 2%, it means you have to take out $7,300. And if you cut for 0, you need to take out $2,200. I did that exact same thing. I thought it was take out, get to 0 on the particular budget. It's not, it's the tax increase. And then Mark figured it out and said every single department, what they needed to cut. And if we want to go to 2%, we need to cut $7,300 out of our budget.
Okay, to get an overall town 2% increase.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes. It was so not clear to me, so I'm glad you said that.
I do apologize.
In there that was fuzzy, but I couldn't quite grasp what they were trying to say.
I do apologize because I called it a 2% budget, but it's a 3.05% increase over next year. So one of the things that I don't want to speak for Mark and Brian, and I think it was Brian in particular. Brian is always in the budget discussions every year, and I think Brian understands that with the teen room as a factor, why we were doing what we were doing with the part-time staffing and how sort of integral it is to that effort and that sort of continuation of what we want to do. As sort of losing that person that we were going to have as young adult services, I've sort of stepped up and I've been trying to fill in as much as possible, with the many hats that the library director wears. But, I'm increasingly, I hope to transition a lot of the programming components more to part-time library associates who are interested in contributing to young adult programs. So, if we lose part-time staffing hours, that's I would just say a step in the wrong direction.
Right.
Okay, Kim.
I'll go next. I think this is obviously a very different conversation than we had the last time we met, where we were trying to increase our programming budget and do it the right way and respond to what residents really wanted in terms of increased programming. We're certainly in a different environment entirely. So, to me, it makes sense that we have to keep the programming where we are so we can try and preserve the salaries. I guess my question is, what happens, or when do we find out if we have to go to the 0% version?
The selectmen will be discussing this. The reason why I believe we were asked to send something in by May 1st, I'm saying I was asked, but I need you all to approve whatever I send, which is why we're meeting today. The 5th the selectmen are going to be reviewing these budgets, and I believe they wanted enough time to review them and be able to ask any questions. So, you know, I suspect we'd have selectmen that are probably going to look at this meeting, hopefully to get a sense of where the library is and why all of this is important. But I have also volunteered to be a part of their discussion or to come to a future meeting if they have any questions regarding, you know, what we do. I believe the 0%, this is affecting everyone financially. It's affecting businesses. There's nobody, I think, who is unaffected. I think that's fair to say. So they really wanted to look at what a no tax increase for next year, what is sort of going to be the fallout for that. And you know, you can see from our budget, from reviewing it in depth over the past few days, is that a majority of our dollars every year go towards the staff. And that is not unique in departmental budgets, is that most of the budget for many of the departments is to pay the people that work there to provide the services that they offer. So realistically, I mean, we were able to maintain our staffing levels even in the 2% version, but we can't in the 0%. I don't know that any other department can have the staffing levels. And, you know, there's been discussions on the selectmen side about adding additional staff with the police department and with youth and family services. So, you know, I still think they're trying to make that happen because those needs were clearly, they were clearly outlined, but we're in a difficult situation and we're going to have, I don't envy the selectmen. They're going to have to make difficult decisions. You know, the library is what we have to focus on.
So as they look at the 0% version, is there the understanding of the impact of what will happen if we do have to go to that? So is there going to be any sort of like editorial that goes along with it to say that if our part-time salaries are cut by that much, that we need to either impact the hours we're open or have to, you know, look at closing the teen room for certain hours? Like, will they have that level of understanding as to like what those impacts actually entail with that reduced budget?
Can I just hop in here for a second? The Board of Selectmen can recommend anything, but my feeling would be if we do feel that our staff is going to be cut and we really think it's a bad idea, we take it to the town meeting to vote on the town meeting floor, because and I feel strongly we should go to the map to support the staff as it is right here at the 2% level. So if the selectmen like it or don't like it, that makes a difference, but they do not have the final say. The final say is the votes for our budget on the floor of the town meeting. So we do have a court of last resort, and we have had good luck going to the town meeting with our budgets previously.
So there was a memo that was attached with the budget sheets, which I intend to include. You know, after tonight, I'm probably going to date the memo just to you know, have a record of when this was discussed and when you guys were able to take a look at it. So you know, despite being a librarian, I'm not always the best wordsmith. I tried to do my best in sort of outlining the changes, but I've highlighted on your screen exactly what I think the financial impact is going to be. And I would say, you know, the two things that would suffer as a result of this are obviously the teen room, which we've talked about, but it would also be very difficult, I think, because many part-time staff in sort of the 0% version, no one gets laid off, but people or let go, but people who enjoy working 2 or 3 days a week would automatically go down to 1 3-hour shift a week. So first of all, I think we'd have problems with employee retention, or at least people who would start looking for other work, because 3 hours a week probably wasn't what people signed up for when they got the job. And then in addition to that, a 22-hour reduction, especially with 3 service points, upstairs, children's, and teen, would automatically affect Saturdays in particular, which we augment with a lot of part-time staff. That's where a chunk of the part-timers work, in particular the high school students who can help. You know, they don't cover the service points, but they help maintain the staffing levels throughout Saturdays because that's one of the only times they can work. So, the high school kids are deeply affected, but again, we have 5 of those. This affects 10. So it went into the associates as well, which are part of the coverage. So, I don't want to say we'd have to look at reducing hours, but if that's what's supported, that might be a discussion we end up having, especially if this lasts several years.
Are we allowed to have volunteers?
Cover service points?
Well, like, like if some of the part-timers you had to get rid of, could you replace them with kids like, I'm thinking of Cassie and Naya, who will be in high school, who would probably be more than happy to volunteer 5 hours or something, or 3 hours a week.
We've just, the assistant town administrator, Vanessa Hale, and I have discussed this, and, we do have 4 senior tax write-off volunteers who actually, I don't know what the status of the credit that they usually get is at this point, but because we already have those volunteers and they assist so much, those are primarily the weekly volunteers that come in. I have been very clear on volunteer activities are different for a number of reasons than the paid staff activities. There's a reason why we pay people, even if they're in high school, to do certain activities versus why they volunteer. And the problem with having volunteers as replacements for part-time staff mean that when we try to restore this budget in a couple of years, people are going to go, well, can't volunteer. And
I get it. I just was trying to think of a patch, way to save. The other thing is, like you said, if people aren't going to be happy with the 3 hours, can you then maybe, if say 2 people leave, can you then give those 6 hours to somebody else to retain them? Or will that be or do you follow?
We can do that, but I really, I would absolutely prefer not to.
Oh, no, I agree with you. I'm just saying, if they leave, we're not going to be stuck with 3 hours less. We'll be able to transfer it to another employee.
One of our high school students is a senior.
Okay.
And it is likely that he's the only male page. It's likely he's not going to work moving forward in the fall. So even though he's in next year's budget, because he might work over the summer and he hasn't resigned yet, so we budgeted for hours, we would probably allocate the hours for him to the other part-time library pages. And that's sort of how it works. I don't think with part-time staff, if somebody is to leave, that we would hire somebody new. The town has put a hiring freeze.
Yep.
So we're actually actively being told not to interview and hire other people for the time being. So that is the type of scenario we would look like. I feel like there is a sort of a contract we have with the employees that's informal, but is that we talk about, and I discuss the amount of hours that they're able to work when they accept the position. And the understanding is that we will try to maintain that as much as possible. A good example of this was this was disrupted during the flood because half the library was inoperable when that occurred. And we had to reduce part-time staffing levels. Some of the part-time staff nobody outright quit, but some of the part-time staff did look for other employment and got another part-time job while they were waiting, for the library to become fully operational again. That's something that other people could do, but I'm very resistant because that created scheduling issues when we came back. And so if we try to maintain this and we avoid sort of a staffing disruption like what occurred during the flood, I understand that this is a different scenario and that right now no one's at the library, but we need to plan for when people come back. And that's an important component of all of this.
Thanks, Ryan.
Jane, do you have any questions?
Well, I know you covered this right at the beginning, Ryan, but are you using the full staff now? I mean, the full and part-time people to do things remotely? Are you maintaining the same level of employment now that the library is physically closed?
We are attempting to as much as possible. Not everybody was equipped to work on remote projects initially. You know, there are part-time staff that are engaging in remote projects at that time, and they are assisting me in helping to do some self-reporting, because
Okay.
as you can imagine, it is difficult to keep track of people's hours and their activities now. I am scheduling a staff meeting for all of us, part-time staff included, for next Wednesday afternoon. You know, my expectations are low on the participation for the high school pages, but I have communicated to the rest of the part-time staff that I would like them to participate, and I'm making it a requirement. You know, they have to have a reason if they're not going to attend. So the short answer, Jane, is no, because we're not doing the same types of activities that we were. And again, not everybody, you know, we found that our staff has varying levels of computer skills, and not everybody can review a book, I would say. So that's not a bad thing. You know, people bring different strengths to the table. But it's been on me to try to come up with what the remote projects would look like, and then how to have people participate. So we are looking at models in the next couple of weeks where we would sort of train the trainer. Some of the full-time staff might do tutorials where they are training staff in different activities or different databases. I think the big thing we'd like to do is database education. I think a lot of libraries, sort of user instruction, a lot of our staff and a lot of the public, you know, are experimenting with electronic resources in a way that they haven't before. And questions are coming up. And, you know, I've made myself available, but I get a lot of questions, I would say, about that. I usually get like 2 or 3 a day. I'm looking at how I can spread that out, especially if this lasts for more time.
Are there, just a follow-up on that, are there any projects that they could do in the library, or are you not going in there?
A limited number of staff have been going into the library during sort of pre-selected times. So I probably average once every week or week and a half, you know, depending on the math. You know, Kim and I, Kim Ivers, we're looking at going in on Mondays moving forward, because we wanted to make sure it was safe for us to do so, right? That the staff's safety is my big thing right now.
What do you mean? Because it's been more than 2 weeks since you've closed the library.
It's been about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So you know, I was at work Monday through Thursday the following week, and then we were really getting feedback that if we didn't need to be in the building, if it wasn't absolutely necessary, that we should try to minimize that.
Oh,
And I was trying to stagger the staff so we didn't have more than 4 people in the building at one time, so people would come in. There's also, I would just say, some of the staff are concerned about their safety, and I want to be mindful of that. You know, if they're concerned, you know, that was something that, because it was an evolving situation, we hadn't.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, you get what I'm saying. So
I do. I just was, I know some other libraries are having people working in the physical library, 1, 2 people, you know, apart, but working and therefore using hours, that's all. Which would be something productive for you.
And I know Kara Logan has volunteered, and Leah has come in, like, you know, a couple times to shelve books.
Yeah.
So, you know, Kim and I, it's really exclusively Kim and I who are doing the book drop, because we don't know about, the book drops aren't closed, they're open, so people can still return materials. But we do that safely. We're doing it with gloves. We separate out the material before we reshelve it. So we'll process the book drop returns, and then we actually shelve it on a different day.
Yeah.
So, and they're usually at least 3 days apart. Usually it's closer to it's been more like a week. So, you know, I think I have a picture of all the delivery bins that are going out. And because libraries have locked their book drops in some towns,
Really?
we actually have been getting returns, I think, from other communities. So it's at the point where I've run out of delivery bins, and Westboro is going to do a contactless pickup of some of their excess bins so that we can have a couple extra, but it's becoming a physical problem
Yeah.
in their storage, is that we have like the delivery people are not going to like us. They're going to have to send a separate truck, I think, when we reopen, just to process
To get them to their real homes.
So I am looking for opportunities for how we could have staff come back, but
Mhm.
the social distancing piece of this makes that somewhat difficult, because if we maintain our staffing levels in the same way during this period where everybody has to be 6 feet apart, that is a little trickier.
Yeah, well, you
I
do have the
definitely,
2 floors, though. I mean, you could have,
But you're letting them, they're doing work at home too. It's not like they're not working. So
no, I'm just saying, if you need to fill more hours, there are other
Yeah.
jobs that can be done in the library where it's definitely been empty for more than, what, 5 weeks, did you say, 6 weeks? It's safe to be in the building, just not with those books you've quarantined that came in
Yeah.
that book drop.
So Ryan, what about having staff members basically work as if they were billing per job they're doing and keeping track of what they're doing, so that you have down on paper, I don't know what, Pat spent so many hours doing this, that, and the other thing. In other words, sort of keeping timesheets as if they were self-employed, and just say, I did this week and I did that. It just seems like there's no accountability at this point. I'm not criticizing at all, but I'm saying there's no record of what everybody's been doing. And I know some people.
no, I have had part-time staff self-report, and that is something we're going to talk about with the full-time staff too. You know, trying to find the opportunities for them to assist in remote projects. And then Jane, you're looking at exactly the type of model I think we want to go in. We may not be open to the public, but there are a number of sort of projects and activities that we could be engaging on in the building.
In the
You know,
building, yeah.
so one of the projects we were just about to start was weeding the fiction collection. So sort of reviewing it and then
Yeah.
see what during it, obviously not including March 2020, but anything for a specified amount of time that wasn't circulating. You know,
Yes.
we were looking at whether or not that should be taken out of the collection in order to maintain the space for the new books coming in. So that I think we still want to engage in that project, and we don't, honestly, it actually is a little bit easier for people to work on that if they're not assisting the members of the public at the same time, which is typically what the staff do when they undertake a project like this. They have to do it sort of in the background.
Yeah.
So, you know, Nikayla is a good example, and she's part-time. She had to physically come in order to package and process the seed exchange orders. So she had to access the library, I think 3 separate times, just to work on that particular project for several hours. So that right there, and she gave me some data on the amount of time that she was doing. She did work at home before she came in, and then she had to do work at the library. And then when she left with the seeds, she had to do additional work after that. So that ended up being probably a little bit more work than she would even normally do. And that's something I'm trying to capture. I would just say, you know, personally, I don't think this is surprising to any of you. I have really been surprisingly just as busy, you know, even without going in all the time.
I'm not
So
surprised. I'm not surprised.
Right, really.
Of course not.
I want to have staff in the building, but I need to again, the dynamic evolving situation has meant, you know, I need to make sure that it's safe for
Yeah.
people to do so.
No,
And-
no question. Okay, yeah.
And what you said, Jane, too, and I've been doing some of the online trainings, and as I said to Ryan, they were saying, you know, try to get that out, what your people are doing in your newsletters and other things, so that when it comes to time for budgets, people in town and on the boards don't feel like they've just been having a vacation while getting paid. That it's important to highlight all the work that they're doing, even though the library may be closed. So exactly what you were saying too, to keep, you know, and Marguerite, let's let everybody know how hard they're working.
Right, yeah,
So,
exactly.
Come July, if part-time staff are not in the building, sorry, Kim, but if part-timers are not in the building and we cannot identify that they're contributing to remote projects, I don't think it makes sense to pay them. I
Yes.
think we've given, I've tried to give them opportunities at this point. I'm trying to bring people together for a staff meeting next week. If people just can't, because of what's going on in their lives, because of the situation right now, then their job will still be there for when they're ready to come back. I think that's the situation we're going to be in. But nobody was anticipating this. Nobody was ready to work on remote projects right away. I think I'm really advocating that we continue paying all staff, including part-time, through June. And then, we'll see what the situation is in July, and we'll see if people have the ability to come back fully.
That's a good point. Kim, what were you going to say?
Well, I mean, like Ryan just said, it's like we've had some time now to reflect on what has been going on. And it sounds like we do have more options of, what we feel is safe for people to work in the buildings on, and projects that would work for remote. So maybe in our next update, instead of a typical director's update that you give, maybe we need to see just a sense of the projects that are going on and how those have changed with people working remote and being home. So, I mean, I support you in wanting to pay the staff for the next couple of months. But at the same time, I think we need to be fiscally responsible and make sure that we're using this time to the best advantage that we can. So, what can we do for planning for when we are back into the building that would, alleviate some things that we could get out of the way, like planning book clubs or social media content, getting all of that stuff kind of beefed up now, since we can't be in the building, so that when we are in the building, then the staff can focus on customer support, and they'll have kind of this backlog of, social media content that they could easily push out, or, they wouldn't have to stop and plan a book club because, they've already done that work. So I think for us, it sounds like it's already a lot of stuff that you guys have been doing. I mean, you guys turned on a dime for the seed library so quickly and made that happen. So I think, as Amy had mentioned, it's like, let's figure out what those things are and make sure that we as a group are all aware of it, and that we can also communicate that to the community, so we can say, hey, we're adapting and we're using this time to the best that we can. And we're just going to have to keep adapting as we go and as we get new information.
There you go. That's a really good point. The other thing I wanted to ask you, Ryan, is when you have the talk with the meeting with the staff, is it next Wednesday you're going to talk to them?
Yeah.
Just as long as they're totally clear that the parameters are, they have to be working on something in order to be considered, the part-timers, to be considered to continue to get paid. As long as it's crystal clear to them that at least I, speaking for me on the board, would like to see some evidence that they're not on vacation. As long as they understand that, so that it doesn't catch them unawares when it's like, oh, sorry, we've got to let you go for a while.
Yes.
Okay. Radio silence. Anyone else want to say anything about our budgets? I suppose we could vote on which ones whether the 0 and the 2, which one we want to support, or both, or neither, or whatever.
I would also just like to say that I think you've been doing a great job, Ryan. And I think the important thing is to stay as flexible as you can and keep as many people with different skills on board. I think it's really hard to predict what the future is going to look like. I think it's going to be a while before people feel comfortable gathering in groups. You might have to do online book group. There's all sorts of things that are going to come up that we didn't picture this 2 months ago, and I don't really predict what next fall is going to look like, never mind the summer. So I think you're right to think of all the different things and keep the staff on board to try and meet those needs. And we don't know what they are yet. So good job.
We are one of 300 libraries that are participating in doing virtual programs. And I did actually update the library's website in the past 24 hours with everything we're offering in May. So, on average, we're doing 3 a week. There's the 2 weeks at the end of May, we have a virtual author event for somebody who was supposed to be at the library in April. She's going to do it through Zoom, and Recreation is helping. Recreation has been great, and they are assisting us with registration, and they have a paid Zoom account, which they're going to allow us to utilize for that program in particular. And then Mandy, who Roberge, who had the Crafternoons grant, she has been able to translate one of her henna tutorial programs as a virtual one. So we've talked about doing that. We're doing May as a pilot, but it is very likely it's already full. Registration, I think, went up 3 days ago. So that tells you there's an appetite for doing something like this. It's very likely we will do follow-up programs. We probably will do it monthly for as long as this situation is occurring. Kim and I are engaging with the full-time staff, and we'd like to open it up to part-time about generally what children's programs could look like, in particular summer reading. That's, I think, our next big hurdle to tackle. That's a big thing for Kim. That's a big part of her job, and she can almost do nothing the same way, especially if kids are staggered in how they approach. And I don't want to minimize our summer reading programs. We get 150 to 200 people at some of those special events. If we do a magician, if we do, a puppet show, those things may not sound exciting, but for the young participants that come in and for their parents, it really is. And Kim does such a fantastic job in organizing summer reading. And this has been a big blow, I have to say.
Yeah, she does a great job, and they are so fun. I mean, I'm sure Kim can say, but I know Naya looked forward to those. They were on the calendar, and it was, the highlight of the week, those summer programs. So it is hard that they're missing.
Yeah.
I will say staff that have no direct input typically into children's programs are getting involved already. They're already talking to Kim and brainstorming ideas. And it's been, I think I try to take positive takeaways every day, which I know can be difficult, but seeing the synergy of the staff, and then many of them participated in our virtual book club pilot in April. I'm not gonna sugarcoat this. It was more library staff members than anything else. So it was really an opportunity for us to come together as a group and just sort of check in with each other. And I think people were doing that for the social component. Maybe not everybody loved the book, which led to a good discussion.
It makes a better discussion that way.
Last time I'm reading the Iliad for book club. Listen, here's the question.
Yeah.
Does Kim Ivers need anything from us, because she's bearing a lot of the brunt of this? Could you ask her if there's anything she'd like from the board to make this time a little easier?
Sure. I think some of the programs that we're discussing, I say this, and we've got to approve budgets soon. They may have a cost associated with it, and we're talking about taking money out of programs next year. So I think if we could find ways to augment that, I think the friends of the library are going to hopefully assist her. But this is sort of a new road we're traveling down, and we don't exactly know what type of support she's going to need. I think a lot of what we need to do is try to plan out what our steps would be.
Question for you, Ryan. Are there any of the staff who could be put to work writing grants for programming money at home?
We will certainly explore that possibility. Val DeAngelis and Amy Townsley helped. They assisted me with the Idea Lab reporting, which I've had to do since the closure. And then, Amy and actually Carol Logan, they both reviewed multiple times the Dig In Garden grant that we wrote. So, I think all of that, those are people that may not have, I don't think Amy and Carol had a lot of grant experience, but they gave such valuable feedback as part of that. So even if it's just, even as an entry, if they're proofreaders, I think on the grants, and they can provide. I'm not always the most grammatically sound individual. You know, it helps if I'm not abusing the English language when I'm writing up these grants. So, you know, can we have staff members explore grants? Absolutely. I don't know what the status of many of these grant organizations is going to be in the future. You know, I think the Southborough Community Fund is looking for how they can support organizations in the next couple months as part of sort of an emergency thing. You know, we're not providing food to people, and I want to be kind of I don't want to, again, we're technically considered non-essential, but I think a lot of people are looking to the library, again, as a sort of that community hub, as how can the library help support and educate and entertain. And I think that is, we will look at opportunities for that, and the staff can assist with efforts to write grants. Not everybody on staff is a writer, and I would just say that's okay. But you know, are there ways that they can do some of the research for the people who are writing stuff up?
Right.
Those are
And
definitely things we'd explore.
Kim Regan, you have experience with grant writing, yes?
No,
Who am I thinking then? Who helped us? Well, either way, to me, it would seem like at least put some people who are going to be at home to work researching grants for that maybe could raise funds for programming. What's to lose, right? Might as well give it a try. And then,
As sort of the primary library grant writer at the moment, I would just say, and Kim has written some up too. It's undertaking this and identifying grants is sort of its own full-time job. It can be difficult, and then a lot of the grants are specific, which says, you know, you don't just say I'd love to do this and I'd love to have programs and please give me money. You really have to have a very sort of robust, concrete plan. And right now with so many variables, I think that is difficult. I think we'd have to look at what we want to do for summer reading and then see if there's ways we could support it.
all right, okay. We maybe, does anyone want to say anything more on the budget, or are we ready to vote?
Is the point that we have to approve both of those budgets, Ryan, that you are sending to the town? Is that what we
So-
need to do here?
No.
No, you can vote to support. I think it makes sense to support one, would be my advice. You know, I would just say, I don't, as a general reminder, I don't get a vote. But I would not support the sort of I'm using quotes, the 0% version, because that does not maintain the same staffing levels and would affect service conditions moving forward. In particular, if we're looking at a 3-year time frame. That, again, I think Amy, as Donnie touched on this, we're not talking about just next year when we're submitting this. We're talking about multiple years. That was made very clear in the communications. So,
But you have to submit all of these, but one will carry our approval to the town, correct? Mark wants all 3 of these budgets from you, correct?
he just wants 2. He just wants the 2 revised versions. They already had the original one, and that was what was going to be on the town warrant. So, you know, again, what is town meeting going to look like is a great question that I think that is still being asked currently. You know, that's a difficult question the town is grappling with, and all towns in Massachusetts who use that format are. But I don't want to say doing a budget reduction is something I'm super happy about in the current climate, but the 2% version where we're cut, like Marguerite said, you know, it's over $7,000, but I can make that work, I would say, for next year and for years moving forward, because it was an amount I made work now. I had to augment that by trying to work on a bunch of grants while I was, you know, sort of on top of my regular role, but we just talked about having staff help me. So there you go. So
I guess
that is something we can explore.
okay. I guess part of my point is, are we certain, and I'm throwing this out there being devil's advocate, what if we said, thanks, and we get it that the town's in a tough spot across the board, but we really stand behind our original budget? what will happen as a result? I mean, are we, because which board is gonna vote for a 0%? No board's gonna say that. So automatically, it seems like our choices are more either stand our ground and expect to get slashed, or say, yep, we'll kind of meet you halfway and do the 2% one.
But see, Amy, if we go to the town meeting, the selectmen can recommend to slash it. But if we get to Janet, you've done a lot of town meeting work. When we get to the town meeting floor, if we amend our slashed budget to go back to the 4%, and the voters of the town vote to support us, that particular line item in the budget, then we get our 4%. So what I'm hearing you say is, should we go with 4% or 2%?
Kinda.
I like that.
I mean, I only say that because I know we have made cuts in the past, and believe me, I get it. Everyone's suffering, and that's not my,
Right.
it's not necessarily what I think the right thing to do is, but I didn't know if it was an option. And
is
whether it was
totally an
one that
option.
anyone was,
Right.
our budget is relatively small compared to other budgets. We have been the really nice people playing in the sandbox for these last several years anyway. Do we feel strongly enough that we should go back to our original and just say, nope, we're trying to be good every year about this? Or do we really think it's the right thing to do to go to the 2% one?
So the 2% is on the screen, and I'm not going to cut off discussion so the rest of the board can weigh in. You know, the term fiscally responsible has been thrown out, I think, by a couple people here. You know, it warms my heart, Amy, to hear you say that and to talk about you know, maintaining I think, you know, we did a lot of work on the budget, and the numbers made sense at the time that it was submitted as far as what we wanted to accomplish in the next couple of years. The landscape of the world has radically changed.
Absolutely.
And I think I would just say we're still getting, if you look at this, you know, over $26,000 in next year's budget. A lot of that goes towards you know, our book budget increases slightly, not that much. And then, you know, the staffing levels go to where we need them to be. So that's where where the money goes.
I get it. I know we're talking about the next several years though, and that this is what's happening now, but a year from now, if things are pretty much back to normal, are we going to find ourselves scrambling again and wishing we had felt more strongly? I don't know where I'm falling on this completely, but I think where I am right now might be different than where I feel a year from now about our budget. And is it worth us right now taking a few minutes to talk about the possibility of holding our ground with our original budget? I don't know what people feel about that.
I
I'm just
think
throwing it out there because I feel like we should at least throw it.
Well, this is a thought that Marguerite put out right in the beginning of this meeting too, that the town meetings have traditionally supported the library in whatever their needs are, because it is a unique situation in Southborough that it kind of functions as the town center. We don't really have anything comparable.
Mhm.
I agree with Amy.
I think I feel more comfortable with going with the 2%. Not that we wouldn't use the money well and all that, but I think we need to be good citizens.
Yep.
The town is going to have less revenue. It just is. And they've put off tax payments. They're doing what they can to help the people who live here. I think the best we can do is try to support that. I think to dig in these times and say, no, we want to have what we planned. Well, everybody's going to feel like that. And the library, I think, is incredibly valuable for the town, but there are other departments that are as well. So the social services departments, et cetera. So I would feel more comfortable making the halfway step, but I don't have a problem at all with fighting for that versus going to the place that affects staffing levels.
Yeah. I agree. Amy, I think it's absolutely worth having this conversation right now. My point of view is closer to Janet's, that I don't feel like this is the time to make the stand for it. First of all, because in terms of programming, like, we don't know what the world is going to look like once things do open. And I don't think any parent would feel super comfortable going to a children's magician over the even late summer where there are 150 other people there. I just think that is going to change. So, I mean, I'm more comfortable supporting the 2% version, even knowing that it's, you know, bringing our programming money back to, you know, the place where we were trying to just get out of a few months ago. But at the same time, like, if the world is drastically different a year from now and things are better, then I'd feel comfortable going to town meeting and advocating for a heftier programming budget. And if the town really does want that, they'll support that at the time. So.
Agreed. Agreed.
Amy,
Amy?
sorry, your voice is off.
You're on mute.
Sorry. I thought you were saying that what we submit will be basically submitted for 2 years into the future.
Yes.
Right, so we
No.
won't have the choice next year to go up then, Kim.
It's not going up.
You technically
No.
have, you have a choice every year, just to be clear,
Okay.
is whatever you guys vote. You know, I do, with your feedback, I put together a budget. And then, you know, for initiatives that I feel you would support, and for directions we want to move in, we try to make the budget reflective of that. You know, I
Okay.
think it's very likely I'm not going to look at massive increases over the next couple of years, because I do want to try to work with the town as much as possible. And I think this discussion is very valuable, but I want to be clear is that if the majority of the board wants me to go to Mark and say, we want our original budget to stand, that is not what I would recommend at this point. But if that is what you compel me to do, I am happy to have that conversation and then see what Mark does. I will say it's probably going to necessitate more meetings because I have a feeling like the town would give us some feedback on that, and they may want to.
So basically, we could reassess, and then if next year, if everything, knock wood, is back to normal, say, then nothing precludes us, like Kim said, from going up another % or whatever to meet the need.
Well, if you read what Mark Purple said in his letter that accompanied this whole thing with his 2%,
Yeah.
1%, he said no.
Well, that's what I'm asking,
He
because
said no.
then,
If you reread that, he said what you're going to have here, you must probably anticipate having until 2024, 2025.
Just as sort of a side note, and again, I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot. I hope I'm not talking over anybody, but I know it seems dire, but you have to remember, people are like, oh, we're not going to be able to do any big projects. Actually, in the next year, we're doing a massive project on our roof because we're still have that pending CPA project. So work is going to be done, and that has already been secured and approved, and that work has continued actually throughout the closure.
I've noticed.
And the benefit of it having be the facade is that they can access the building even when it's closed. So that is a sort of an odd thing that has worked out. But you know, I don't want to make it seem there are avenues for us to look at grants to support programming. That's what we've done in the past. You know, I think we want to eventually move to I think we're going to revisit a lot of the conversations we had several months ago when we talked about the importance of programming and when it was an appropriate time to ask the town and to engage with them. The impact of the public safety building, of the tax levy capacity of the town, that's going to be a factor in future budget cycles. Just it is. So, and then the pandemic on top of that. Is part of the reason I think why the situation looks so bleak.
Right. And I'm convinced that you and we can make whatever budget work. You know, if we had to go to the zero, that we could. My question was more what should we do and what are the factors we're thinking about? And it seems like fiscally responsible is hugely important, really, to all of us, because this isn't, you know, this whole pandemic thing certainly hasn't discriminated between any of the other town services and all of that kind of stuff. So are we ready to go ahead and vote? Everyone seems like we're talking about the 2% thing and, you know.
Okay, and I talked to Ryan about this earlier. We really have two votes on our hands now, if we're ready to vote. Is everybody ready?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. The first vote would be to approve 2%. The second vote would be to not approve 0%. In other
Okay.
words,
To reject it, okay.
okay, does that work? Okay, so, and this is a roll call vote. Could you please say your name so Jane can get it down, and then say aye or nay or yes or no, depending on how medieval you are. Okay, so
You could probably put it in one motion. We vote to approve the 2% and to not go
Reject,
forward
yeah.
there, and just have it be one vote
if
that
you're
way.
okay with that, what do you think, Ryan? Which would be easier for you to negotiate with?
It's completely up to you. I think Janet's suggestion, if that is the will of the board and that's the motion that you want to make, then that's the motion that you should make, and then see how the vote goes.
Okay, so I move that the Library Board of Trustees approve the 2% budget, which Ryan prepared, and not approve the 0% budget, which Ryan prepared.
I, Amy as Donnie, second that motion.
Okay, so Kim?
Well, we're voting in alphabetical order and Jane's still writing.
Then we
Oh,
wait.
I got it. All right, I'll go. Jane Davis, I vote aye.
Okay,
Marguerite,
okay, Marguerite Landry, I vote aye.
Janet Maney, aye.
Kim Regan, aye.
Amy Vacris, aye.
Amy as Donnie, aye.
It's unanimous, the motion passes. Okay, I think we've done with our work today. Do we need to set a date for our next meeting?
Probably.
Sure, why not?
All right.
Do we have anything, Ryan?
I assume it's going to be a budget meeting when we hear from the selectmen.
Yeah, you said they were meeting on the 5th, they were gonna
The-
talk?
The Tuesday, the 5th. So I don't know, their agenda isn't posted yet, so we'll learn more. You know, I would encourage you probably to, if you have the ability, and you can jump in and view it. If not, to maybe look at the meeting. I will summarize it and just send out what the sort of the final decision was.
Okay.
You know, I think it is likely that they will, I think, I can't predict where they'll land. You know, I think they're going to have a discussion and then get the feedback from the different departments. Mark did state, I think more than once, that it was the 0% is more of an exercise to see exactly how severe the cuts were going to be. You know, for us, it's fairly severe, I would say, right? So I can't imagine other departments are not in the same situation. Following the budget meeting, you know, I would like to get us together again, if once we sort of get some feedback on what the operational impact would be on what a reopening would look like. I don't know. I don't know when that's too preliminary. I think I'd have to get back to you on a potential dates once we get back from the state and the governor. It definitely would not be before May 18th, which is how long the stay at home and the non-essential
Right.
business.
Well, what if
closure.
we have another virtual meeting on Wednesday, the 13th, which gives us 2 weeks and we're after the select? Is that too soon? Or do you want to wait for almost a month?
It's completely up to you. I know it's been a while since you guys came together, and like I said before we started, it's nice to see everybody. So I'm happy to
We all miss each other. So my sense of it is maybe on the 13th, which will be 2 weeks from today, the whole COVID quarantine situation will be a different color. And that might be worth talking about in terms of where the library wants to open up, or we'll know more. I don't know, is that too soon for people?
No,
No, that's a good idea.
I think it's a good idea.
just to give you some feedback, the new town meeting date is going to be June 13th.
Mhm.
So that that's how far a town meeting is currently being pushed out to, because of the extension of the closure.
I thought they could only move it 30 days at a time, or
Yeah,
that's just
Yes.
the
yeah,
unofficial
Yes.
date.
they just did, right.
They just, I believe it must have come from the moderator. The moderator had decided to push it out because I think the governor gave 18th as the date and town meeting had to occur by the 16th. So
Okay, yeah.
now we have the feedback in being able to push it out. The meeting date may move again. It might.
It's good,
So,
yeah.
you know, don't plan on, I think June 13th is the earliest, you know, again, the select meetings have been going over the challenges of the town meeting date and then what town meeting will look like. I really think they're only going to have discussions about budget, in particular financial impact items. That has been a lot of the selectmen's discussion. And then there will be a fall town meeting as well. And they're looking at what can be reasonably pushed to that. You know, one of the things that we said is our boiler in the facilities budget, you know, that's necessary, and pushing it out to fall would affect John's ability to replace it in the time frame that he wanted to work with. So, you know, that was something I let the capital planning committee know on Monday morning. So, you know, I'm trying to do the meetings as much as possible just to stay informed. 2 weeks, I mean, I can update you on what we have in 2 weeks. I just can't tell you what the updates will look like. You know, it might be a quick
I
meeting.
think, well, I personally, since everything is so fluid, as they say, would feel comfortable with meeting in 2 weeks just to see how the selectmen responded and what the medical situation looks like for the state of Massachusetts. So are we good on that? Can we?
Yeah, that works.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Sure.
4 p.m. virtual, Wednesday, the 13th of
Okay.
May.
Did you
I
say
I didn't hear,
4
Yeah.
o'clock again? 4 o'clock again?
Yes, 4 is good. Does that work for everybody?
yes.
All right, super. Okay, thanks so much, everybody. And thank you, Ryan, for fighting the good fight on this whole thing.
Yep.
My God, you've all been troopers. So
And getting me connected. I don't know what was up with that, but Ryan, I guess I'll talk with you or something another time about why it didn't come through on my email. I got the reminder for the meeting, just no.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
send you to my mother-in-law too, Ryan.
This was my first rodeo with doing it through the town, and I know a lot of people have publicly thanked Tom LaFlamme, the IT manager, but this
Yeah.
would not have happened without him, and there was a
Thank you,
quick
Tom.
he's so wonderful.
Yeah, thanks,
quick
Tom. He does a
turnaround.
good job. He's very patient.
So I might be able to connect you with him, Amy, and then you could do it. Thank you for everybody who watched from home,
Everybody, stay
we
safe.
should say, or who's viewing this meeting after it occurred.
Yep.
I know everybody wanted to know what was going on with the library, and it was an exciting meeting. So you, just as a reminder, you do have to vote to adjourn, and that also needs to be a roll call.
All right, Marguerite.
Sorry.
Oh, can't get away from it. Okay, I move that we adjourn the meeting. It is now exactly 5:30 p.m. Jane?
Okay, got it.
I, Amy as Donnie, second that motion to adjourn the meeting.
Are we voting alphabetically?
Yeah.
I vote Jane Davis, I agree.
Margaret,
yes.
Henry, aye.
Janet Maney, aye.
Kim Regan, I.
Amy Vacris, aye.
Amy as Donnie, aye.
I love this when we do this. We're so good at it all of a sudden.